Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where in the world you are seeing this little course. My name is Patrick HENZ, and I have the pleasure to speak about the responsibility for AI, and we will discuss this from the legal and ethical side. A little bit about my person. I started with business administration, which I studied at the University of Cologne, Germany. And here I had a focus on social and economic psychology. So I am interested in behavioral science, and with the time also became interested in the behavior of artificial intelligence. So I started here with investigation. I participated at relevant think tanks, like, for example, at the IEEE Digital Reality Initiative. I'm working related governance, risk, and compliance topics. So I'm closely working together with the legal department, and that's why I also included the legal side into this training. We discuss it generally if you are coming from the health care sector. Of course, we also try to have a little bit of focus on healthcare. The question of responsibilities. Here are two quotes, and honestly, they are not completely new. They may have like 3-4 years already. First one by Eric Brynjolfsson. He's director at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for Digital Economy, so at the MIT. He says, AI won't be able to replace most jobs anytime soon, but in almost every industry, people using AI are starting to replace people who don't use AI, and that trend will only accelerate. And I think we are at the perfect moment for this statement. Since a month or a little bit more than a month, we have available OpenAI's ChatGPT, for example, which is a fascinating tool. Experts are already discussing, will ChatGPT maybe replace a typical search engine, will it replace Wikipedia, because it's a free tool, and I also started using it in my daily life because I can create all kinds of texts. I can write, for example, with this tool, text modules for my emails, invitations for any kind of trainings. So I tell the AI what more or less I want to write, what training it is, and the email writes me a perfect text, which is not only faster, but in many cases also, let's say, a more beautiful English than I would write. Besides this, ChatGPT can write essays about all kinds of topics. It can give you the local risk assessment for any kind of areas. It even can write poems. You just have to define what should be more or less the content, and it writes it for you. And in future, this will be more and more implemented into Microsoft Office. So here we really have the situation right at the moment, and I think over the whole year, that each of us who is somehow working with internet, with a computer, we can automate a lot of our individual tasks, as I've mentioned. So here, Eric Brynjolfsson really nailed it. Second quote by Paul Ryan. He's a Deloitte partner, responsibility for cyber software and services. He said, every major decision, business and personal, will be made with assistance of cognitive technologies. And also, of course, all decisions, somehow we rely on information which we have on internet, Wikipedia, but all kind of the internet. And of course, we are practically already cyborgs, meaning we don't have the chips implemented inside our body, as you know from science fiction, but all of us, we have our smartphones. And you can think about yourself. How do you feel if you're 1 hour without your smartphone, 24 hours with your smartphone? You would feel good, but or maybe get the feeling that a relevant part of you is missing because you can't check, let's say, Twitter every hour, Instagram, don't get email, and maybe development of anxiety of not having this access. So practically, our smartphone became a relevant part of us. So far, so good. Of course, this includes risks because we are relying on information on the internet, and this information is not always correct. You know all the discussions about fake news, but also, for example, the articles on Wikipedia, they're not always 100% correct. All information are biased because all of us humans, we are biased as we cannot perceive the reality as it is, but always receive the reality via our sensors, ears, eyes, nose, etc. And at the same time, practically combine it with our learned experience, our memories. So we all of us practically live like in different realities. So I back to ChatGPT. I've tested it. A lot of information it provides is perfect, it's correct, but sometimes it is not. So you always have to check the information before you use it. To show it a little bit more graphical, I used Deep AI, which is one of the different public available AI creator softwares, to show a little bit the problem of biases. For example, I asked Deep AI to make give me an image of Mexicans. You see on the left, and here you see typical Mexicans, because they are a little bit, of course, the cliche, using like ponchos, being in rural areas, playing an instrument. Nice romantic idea, but let's say if you're traveling to the Mexican cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, this is of course very far away from reality. On the right, you see the same similar request, group of Americans, and this was the result it gave me. I think a little bit better because also not perfect here, but at least it shows a little bit of diversity. So I think this is a good example that, for example, minorities are not adequately represented in databases. And this is no surprise because these algorithms use databases. And for example, such databases have in average a higher number of photos of male individuals than females. And also there are more photos from, let's say, white humans than with people of other colors. And this can lead to a bias, which hopefully over the time may get reduced. But please be aware, all AI, the same as all humans, is biased. So please, before you use any information, could be text, photos, later music, voice, whatever, please stay critical and maybe, if needed, adapt it. And this because algorithms, they analyze the patterns of the past and have the general prediction that the same patterns will go also into the future, which may be correct or maybe not. Coming to the humans, all of us, we are vulnerable for biases, and this is part of our evolution, as, for example, was documented by the US psychologist Walter Bradford Cannon in his 1915 theory, Fight or Flight. So back in the Ice Age, our ancestors, they had to take care because a lot of the dangerous animals around, like tigers, angry mammoths, etc. So if our ancestor saw, for example, an angry mammoth, it was a moment where he or she should not really take a lot of time for thinking about the situation to analyze it, but really all energy should go into the muscles, especially to our legs, and run as fast as possible. And the body achieves this with producing a higher level of adrenaline. So this is good because we get more energy for the action. On the other hand, the disadvantage, it can block the individual's ability for logical thinking which leads to the problem today that we are sitting in our office and get, for example, fake calls, fake emails from any kind of cognitive hackers who pretend, for example, being a vendor, and that you have to change bank information, whatever. So this they combine with some kind of emergency, or for example, you get such faked information coming from a virtual CEO, whatever. So you get into your panic zone, and then you want to try to get out as soon as possible. Unfortunately, your logical thinking is a little bit blocked, so you may follow instructions which you shouldn't follow. But also, we have the other kind of effect, the other kind of vulnerability. As I said, we need adrenaline to start processes of this, decision-making, of thinking, or also cognitive processes. So if we are not starting having at least a certain level of adrenaline, we don't think enough, and this could be also a problem, as for example, a potential hacker pretends to be quite harmless and with his or her request, and also this can lead to inadequate behavior. I call this gonk risk. For you who like Star Wars, knew this gonk robot, which a lot of Star Wars fans like. Very cute, but very unintelligent, to say it that way. So there is a certain vulnerability for hackers if we perceive something like low IQ, low aggression, low strength, etc., that we not start decision making. We don't challenge the situation enough, and we just underestimate the risk. Thinking about organizations, independent, if we work, for example, in a hospital, we have our small private clinic, we work in an organization, you can understand all groups as a system, and not only connecting employees with other employees, employees with customers, providers, whoever, but also we are connected to databases, machines, tools. And for this fascinating, for me, the theory of a system of profound knowledge by W. Edwards Deming, he has here 4 pillars, which is required to have an efficient system, meaning an efficient cooperation between employees and also employees with machines. This means appreciation for a system, meaning I have to be aware that I'm part of the system, I'm in a negative way a part of the machinery, and I must that I appreciate this, that I'm part of the system. And here we may have different cultural understandings. For example, in organization countries like Japan, system thinking is quite part of the culture, while on the other extreme side, US, we have a highly individual society. So this may be a problem that I appreciate being part of the system. Knowledge about variation, meaning if I decide about any kind of question, I not just do try and error, but I think what will be the consequences if I make decision A, B, C, or D. Theory of knowledge, and this is you can translate into continuous learning. I think you have heard this everywhere you're going. It's not enough finish school, finish university, but our planet is changing, work is changing, and so we have to continue staying up to date. So we must appreciate learning and really conduct continuous learning for ourselves. And very important, Edwards Deming understood the importance of psychology, meaning the human is the key factor of every kind of system. And also he understands, and this he said with his quote, a bad system will beat a good person every time. Meaning if the organization, if we have a bureaucratic overburden, this will have a negative impact on psychology, including that employees look for loopholes, that or they try to deviate to regulations, etc., for the various reasons. So really, we must have a system as non-bureaucratic as possible and as easy and to understand, transparent, and especially if we work together with algorithms, this shouldn't be a black box, maybe not a white box, but a gray box, meaning we must understand how an AI comes to these decisions. And if not, we are vulnerable to the various biases, which I will present to you in the next minutes, as for example, the overtrust in robots based on an experiment on the University Tech of Georgia here in Atlanta, or other experiments which are often aligned to the classic social behavioral experiments, which you may still remember from school or university. Overtrust of robots, and due to the experiment here at the Tech of Georgia, this especially takes place in a situation of panic, meaning you are having a high level of adrenaline, and this already blocks somehow your logical thinking. If you're interested, search for it. You also find short videos, for example, on YouTube. The experiment had been, the participants had been invited to the university, and they simulated that a fire started, and then this robot, which you see on the right, came by. This should be an emergency evacuation robot, and the people, they started to follow this robot because they thought this is an evacuation robot, and it should show me the best way out of the building. Nevertheless, this robot, it was done via remote control, not went to an exit, but also understandable for the participant, went into cycles. So practically the people went nowhere. And quite interesting, even if they had to understand that this robot was not leading to an exit, a lot of the participants continued following the robot instead of taking their own initiative and looking proactively for the exit. So if we use such technologies, for example, evacuation, this is a risk. And here we have also a second reason why, a second bias. So on the one hand, we think this is the machine, and often we think the AI, due to learned helplessness, and I will come to this in a moment, the AI is smarter than me, so I just follow the machine. On the other hand, you may think, especially in other kind of algorithm, if implemented in an organization like a hospital, pharmaceutical company, as an employee, you perceive the AI on a higher level, meaning the AI was practically implemented by the CEO, CFO, so somehow the AI represents a higher level than you are yourself. So also you have authority bias effective here. I mentioned learned helplessness. So here a little bit of our history. Already back 1997, Garry Kasparov lost against Big Blue in chess. So since then, it is impossible for us as a human to beat the smartest machines. And this started now a tendency. 2016, the machine won in the Chinese game of Go. Interesting, 2017, the machine won in poker against the human players. Interesting because poker is not only a game of luck, but also a game of psychology, meaning bluff and non-bluffing. And so interesting is that the AI not only analyzes the cards, but also has an understanding of human psychology, maybe aligned with cameras, and we had such cases in some casinos. The AI may read us and interpret our face, what we are thinking. So in games like poker, also relevant, then they are practically winning in most of the actual video games, StarCraft, Quakes, or also end of last year in Sony's Gran Turismo, the machine is practically not giving the human players any kind of change. So we may say we learned a little bit that the AI is smarter than us, a little bit dangerous, because in limited scenarios, like a video game, even if it's something sophisticated as Go, it's a limited reality. A situation like working for a company, like being a doctor, is still much more complicated. So here the human should work together, consider information from the AI, but still should be the smarter person. Interesting here, a study conducted by Oracle together with Future Workplace back from 2019. And here they came to the conclusion that 64% of the people trust a robot more than their own manager, which is not only a concerning point regarding overtrust in the machine, but also how the relation with your manager is in a lot of our companies. Humanization, and this is a topic which we not only have since the introduction to AI to our lives and work. I mean, already decades ago, some people gave name to their cars, for example, because based on our human psychology, we have a tendency to humanize machines, and the more human they look, of course, the higher the tendency to humanize the machine, like, for example, a robot with more or less a human body, human face, as, for example, also concluded by an experiment by Forehead Robotics, aligned with the classic Milgram experiment. The left robot, you see on the photo, the left face asked questions to the robot on the right, and if the robot on the right gave a wrong answer, the human has to push a button and give an electroshock to the robot on the right. And in this experiment, the robot on the right had an expression of pain when getting electroshocks. I mean, even if from a logical point, the human should have known that this is just a simulation, a lot of the participants stopped, not wanted to give the potential electroshocks to the robot on the right. Quite interesting, especially if you think that the classic Milgram experiment had a little bit different setup. And here the humans, because they not saw the human actor in a different room, gave electroshocks until a level the other person would have died if the electroshocks have been really and not just a fake. So I think this fascinating experiment, which shows we are humanizing the robots, which could be a vulnerability, but also should be used, for example, in factories to avoid sabotage of machines. The more human they look, the less the risk that somebody would sabotage them or just destroy them. So 2 questions for us. Can we feel empathy towards a robot? So yes and no, we can think we understand the feeling of a robot, but I mean, at the end, not, because the robot has not feelings, it just simulates feeling which we perceive. So we feel pity for a robot if it gets electroshock, for example, but it's not empathy, as empathy means we understand the feelings of the other persons, and here we misinterpret potential feelings of a machine. Can robots feel empathy to us? Good question. No, because the machine does not feel, even if it looks cute as the dog on the image. This this image from the dog I got from the Israeli company digital pets which develop such characters for the metaverse, so that if you are on a virtual platform, you have this little little virtual dog besides, as also as emotional support. So even if the dog looks very cute, it looks that the dog understands us, it doesn't. But important, it doesn't feel empathy, but it may read our feelings and then use this information in our benefit or against this. I think most the expert on this topic is Kate Darling. She's a research specialist at the MIT Media Lab and speaking about the topic. So you find her TED talk on YouTube, for example. She wrote a book, and he showed with the various examples that we tend to humanize a machine, which again can be for our benefit, can be used for benefit or against. Other bias, cognitive offloading. Again, here you find here a TED talk by Peter Doolittle, a cognitive scientist, and the message quite basic. We have outsourced a part of our knowledge, so we don't remember maybe anything we need to know, but we know where to find it. And mostly this means we Google or we go to wikipedia.org, or maybe in future we ask ChatGPT. So we know how to get the information. We have a very good feeling that we have continuous access to this information, as we have the smartphone always besides us, but we don't have all the knowledge inside our brain anymore. Again, a risk, because some of the information we have access to is biased, and of course we may have the risk that we may come into situations where we don't have access to internet, so we are without this information. I like to mention the secure base effect, which also aligns with having a dog. Important and is not only the human, not only the AI is biased, also the dog is biased, because the dog, if he or she have grown up with you, learned from you, so the dog feels calm if the behavior shown by any other kind of human is similar than the behavior by its owner. If the other person has a complete different kind of behavior than the own family members where the dog is living, the dog gets nervous, and this may get misinterpreted by me as the owner of the dog, that the dog gets nervous because of its instinct, of its born instinct, but on the other hand, it gets nervous because of the learned behavior. Bias in the machine can be taught consciously, experience. So for example, I can be a teacher for the AI, so they like some kind of personal digital twin. I can give my experience, my values, my opinions into the algorithm, and then the algorithm would decide not only based on information, but also based on the values, opinions it got from my side. And this is would be, for example, a positive example, because I can create a virtual teacher. Let's say theoretically we can have a virtual Albert Einstein in the metaverse, where I can speak with, discuss with, or have or simulate any kind of other human being. But on the other hand, of course, the bias can be included non-consciously, as using databases coming from information bubble, or also the decision where I put the sensors. So I decide to which databases I connect. If I want to control a machine, I decide where to put the different cameras or any other kind of sensors. So the usage, which decision, which sensors to use, where to install the sensors, this comes from the human, and this, of course, influence also the information streams. Another quote from Ivana Bartoletti, founder of the Women Leading in AI Network, resumed: "An algorithm is an opinion expressed in code, so please, we all have to always stay aware the information we get from an AI, independent if text, image, whatever, is always somehow biased." Automation effect. The automation bias is the propensity of humans to favor suggestion from automated decision-making systems and to ignore contradictory information made without AI, even if it's correct. And this is practically what we already discussed. Maybe my body develops too much adrenaline, that I'm in the panic zone, and I just follow what the AI tells me, or I'm not having enough adrenaline, meaning I'm not interested in the topic to think myself what is the correct decision. So I'm just following what the machine is telling you. And either of these two is a risk factor for the quality of decision making. And this can include, as also defined by Professor Skidka, to two different subtypes of automation errors. The omission error, the human fails to notice software failure, so I don't analyze, detect that the information is somehow biased or just wrong. Or on the other way, I fail to identify if an automated error message is wrong to replace the correct information which I already have. So these are the two subtypes. Okay, so far so good. Speaking about biases, but let's come to the legal side. Sorry, again, a quote, this time from the former Chief Justice of the United States, Mr. Earl Warren. He said, in civilized life, law flawed in a sea of ethics, especially if we are speaking about digital transformation. A lot of today's technology is not regulated yet. For example, drones. We don't have really complete laws about the usage of drones. Because so far the different governments not detected an urgency to do this, so we not had, if I'm correct, any fatal accidents, meaning a drone had been fallen on my head and I'm dead. So as we not had such a problem, there are no rules existing, and we have to act in a gray zone where we are led by our ethics, meaning everything which is regulated as conventional technology flows in a bigger sea. There are a lot of topics which are not regulated yet, which includes, of course, also AI still in many points. If we are speaking about the robot, often you hear, please don't think about CPO, please do not think about the Terminator. Today, for this topic, I tell you, please think about the Terminator. You know, as you see, Arnold Schwarzenegger, because this was a killing machine constructed for the war against mankind. Is this machine responsible for its actions? No, because it just acts on its programming. It's a machine, no feeling, no responsibility. So the responsibility would be with the person who had programmed the machine in this case. Coming back to reality, let's think about a circus tiger, or better said, an elephant. Elephant is a good example because elephants, due to scientists, have self-awareness, same as humans dolphins, chimpanzees, etc. So important self-awareness is no game changer. The elephant can learn tricks from the tamer, but nevertheless, it stays an animal. And if such a creature would hurt or kill the tamer, as it happened, mostly because of unhuman treatment towards the elephant, we cannot blame the elephant because the elephant is an animal. So the elephant is not responsible for killing a human in this case. Even though the consequences are, of course, felt by the elephant, as most probably the animal would be killed, because if you killed once, you see a risk that the animal would repeat such learned actions. Maybe you remember some years ago, I think 2017, there was one case. The British photographer David Slater went to the Indonesian national park North Sulawesi. He put a camera on a small tripod, went away, and then a little bit later, a curious monkey came. And maybe attracted just by the reflecting lens, it pushed the button, and due to this did a lot of selfies. They looked very funny. You find the photo, for example, if you go to Wikipedia or search for it. And then had been a long legal conflict between, for example, Wikipedia and the photographer, because the photographer said, it was my setup putting the camera on a tripod and waiting an animal to come to take photos. On the other hand, Wikipedia relied to the US Corporate Office, which defines in Article 306, the US Copyright Office will register an original work of authorship, provided that it was created by a human being. So, meaning any kind of art created by an animal or by an artificial intelligence can not be registered by the human. And due to this, Wikipedia published the photo as public domain. Based on the US law, the photographer couldn't continue with the lawsuit because he hadn't had the budget to fight a big organization as Wikipedia. And also another case, there had been a fatal accident by autonomous Uber car, which had been here active in the US, still having the co-driver, which should have controlled that the autonomous car acts correctly. But the co-driver started looking on the mobile phone, because honestly, 8 hours sitting in a car, especially if the car in 99% works adequately, it's unhuman that you stay awake to really control every step. Nevertheless, the US court came to a different opinion, so it charged the co-driver for criminal charges. But on the other hand, it did not charge Uber because the car was not 100% autonomous. So you have to know level 5 complete autonomous car, independent what you hear in social media, in marketing. This does not exist anymore. You always have to stay actively controlling your car if you put it in a semi-autonomous mode. So that's why there have been no charge against Uber, only the co-driver. From my understanding, this was not correct because, and I'm coming back here to Deming with the idea of the profound and efficient system. It is impossible to ask a co-driver to stay vigilant all the time if you have a highly functional autonomous car. So Uber should have been aware of this problem from my point of view. So maybe other decisions later will come to this different opinions. I hope so. The trolley dilemma, classic dilemma discussed now regarding autonomous car, and I'm sure most of you already heard this. So we have originally it does not come from the AI, because originally we really had a trolley, as you see here. For example, here you have the San Francisco trolley. Let's say the trolley, San Francisco, a lot of mountains, gets out of control, cannot be stopped. So you only have the decision, should it go in the left, go to the left or to the right. On the left, you may have an 80-year-old grandmother. On the right, let's say a 20-year-old student. The question to you, who should be killed by the trolley based on your decision? And then you can have various variations. You have a group of people there. You have one person there. Also quite fascinating. On the left, you have a dog. On the right, you have the cat. Here you have to know that in most Western countries, people prefer dogs over cats. In opposite, for example, to Russia, where people in average prefer the cat over the dog. So let's say if you would ask in the US, most people would kill the cat and to protect the dog, and maybe in Russia, people would kill the dog to protect the cat. Here in the US, mostly we use the philosophy of utilitarianism, and here a short definition. So there are many varieties of the view discussed. Utilitarianism is generally held to be the view that the morally right action is the action that produces the most good, or in this example, the less evil, because some people are dying. Of course, the problem, how to measure the best decision, which life has more value, the university student, the blue-collar worker, the old, the young, 3 against 2, whatever, I mean, how you want to understand the value of life. In opposite to utilitarianism, we use in Germany, for example, mostly Kant's categorical imperative, which is quite the opposite. And this means, in short, a moral decision must be acceptable by everybody who is involved. So I cannot make a decision that I spare the life of 3 people if I have to kill 1 person. This because this 1 person may have not agree to this decision, and if this 1 person not agrees, I cannot make such a decision. I know we have here the focus on healthcare, but let's say if you are somehow related to traffic, based on our German guideline for self-driving cars, which already have been published, parties involved in the generation of mobility risks must not sacrifice non-involved parties. So let's say I have my autonomous car, as you see on the image, with 4 people inside, and I have the decisions, the possibilities to drive the car into the mountain. All 4 passengers will die, or I drive it against the right, where we have the 80-year-old grandmother. I must drive, the car must drive against the mountain and kill all 4 passengers to share the life of the innocent walking person, standing person, because as passengers, we are creating the risk. Okay, now coming to the healthcare, I assume as a doctor or as a practitioner or employee working in the healthcare sector, you are aware of the Hippocratic Oath, which up to today, I think all over the world, the practitioners are swearing on. This more related to tradition, it's not legal liability anymore. Nevertheless, interesting, as even if it's not law, I think all doctors have still the idea to follow this ethical Hippocratic oath. For example, it includes, I will use those dietary regimes which will benefit my patients according to my greatest ability and judgment, and I will do no harm or injustice to term. So again, here it underlines the usage of the greatest ability and judgment means, yes, we have to use AI because it can connect us to knowledge all over the world, especially for rare for rare cases important, but we always must stay critical and challenge the information we get. We cannot just automatically use the information from the algorithm. So we have to stay the human expert and not just being the assistant of the AI. This I like to compare with the relation between dog and owner, especially as I have a dog myself. So I, as the human, I am the alpha, meaning I take care of my dog, the beta. I teach the dog. I may even delegate tasks to my dog, for example, getting the newspaper in the morning. I can learn from the dog. I consider if the dog barks because it may alarm me that somebody is coming to the dog to my house. Sorry. So I have to consider the information I'm getting from the beta, but I am the alpha. I am responsible for the decision, and meaning I have to think myself, including, of course, considering what the dog tells me. On the other hand, the dog, the algorithm is the beta, so it has the responsibility to support me. You may remember Asimov's law of robotics. So the dog must take care of me, should protect me if I'm in danger. Of course, it should learn what from the owner, should execute the tasks, and maybe also teaches the owner, and of course alert the alpha if needed. But please consider that even if this is the setup, there is a risk, for example, in evolution from wolves to dogs. Dogs got their typical puppy eyes, meaning the dog can influence me even subconsciously. So if you have a dog, just think she sits on the left, right, with the big eyes looking at you, with the view, I'm hungry, and due to this, often we give the dog more food as we should do. So the dog, even if the dog is the alpha, it may consciously or subconsciously influence us. The same is true for the algorithm, and we have to take care of this. Responsibility. AI decision-making is based on data input coming from sensors or connection to databases. Past decision, here we speak about machine learning and of course the code itself. Important, all decisions are systematic. So let's say again to the trolley, if I'm the human driver and I have to make a decision inside seconds or less than a second, it's like a reflex. So I'm not responsible if in reflex I drove against the 80-year-old grandmother. Sorry to use again this example to spare the 3 students on the left. So I'm maybe not responsible for this, but the same actions by the autonomous car is based on algorithm, is based on a code. So this is a systematic decision, and here the programmers of the car or the company who sold me the car or maybe changed the car are responsible. So who is responsible for systematic errors? If it's coming from the sensors, it could be a design error here. Responsibility is with the manufacturer, but also from the owner, because need to know principle, meaning I have to maintain my sensors, give the maintenance, and I have to know that information coming from the sensors is always somehow biased, so I have to be aware of this. Position error, as mentioned, again, if I put the sensor on a wrong place, it could be the responsibility of manufacturer, owner, depends who made decision where to put. And also the government can have responsibility in the future, as it's the authorizing body. So the government gives the certificates, for example, to sell a sensor inside its boundaries. If the error is based on bad, low quality database information, of course, the owner of the database may held responsible, the integrator who integrated, for example, an AI solution for me as a doctor can be held responsible here. And of course, again, I have my own responsibility. Should I have been aware that the information is not correct? Yes, no. And this you also have to ask yourself. If the code, the algorithm is wrong, of course, the coder, the provider is responsible. Again, the integrator who integrated a non-adequate algorithm into my kind of overall solution. And again, myself as an owner, because I am responsible to regularly test the algorithms, having audits, controls, and such controls should be demanded by the government if it has a relevant impact on humanity. Important, AI is not a black box. In fact, it's not a white box. It but it's a gray box. But I think it's a lighter gray box than my human head, because if I have knowledge about coding, if I know to which databases the algorithm is connected, I should get some kind of understanding, and maybe a bigger understanding than I have for my human employees, because it's quite difficult to look inside a head. Important, again, decision-making must be audible. On the right, you see the IEEE ethical aligned design principles. It includes human rights, well-being, data agency, effectiveness, transparency, accountability, awareness of misuse, and competence. I put in bold here principle number 4, because what we have to ensure is effectiveness, meaning we use the AI exactly for the reason why we need it, and this is what the algorithm should do, and nothing more and nothing less. That's meaning the higher the effectiveness, the lower the risk. Let's see some regulations from all over the world. Again, we don't have relevant laws everywhere. In some, but more and more countries are implementing such. So here we have the UK Ethics, Transparency and Accountable Framework for Automated Decision Making from 2021, and this for the governmental entities. And here it underlines that the algorithm or system should be designed to be fully answerable and auditable. The responsibility and accountable for algorithms and automation and their associated outcomes should be made clear, meaning the users should be aware why they're using this and how the algorithm is working, how it comes to its conclusion, and especially the more important the decision, it must be clear that the human employee is and stays fully responsible, so there's no excuse that something was done by the algorithm. Always the human is responsible. We have to stay aware of this. And if you're working in a bigger organization, may have to teach our employees and remind them about responsibility. And also here you see some principles mentioned by the UK government. And here I highlighted number 5. Help users and citizens understand how it impacts them. So the more we understand how the AI is working, the better we are prepared, because we are able to interpret the results. European Union, the new liability rules on products and AI, as it was adopted in September 22, so on my birthday. Great, and this to achieve legal certainty for businesses and customers. So important for companies, organizations, profit or non-profit, is of course we have legal liability to understand which are the regulations to comply with. And these rules are important because it strengthens the rights of the consumers. So if there is an accident with an impact now, which is impacted by the robot drone algorithm itself, or the update, the responsibility is with the company and not with the user. And the company has to show now that it was not their fault, and not primarily the user has to show why it was not caused by inadequate behavior of the user. So it helps a little bit in the David against Goliath, strengthen the rights of the user, which can of course also include patients if there was a negative consequence by a decision by a doctor who used AI, or in future, I mean, you saw, I'm sure, the different videos that surgery would be done in special circumstances directly by a robot. So again, it simplifies the legal processes for the victims. It comes to proving that someone's faults led to damage by introducing two main features. First, in circumstances where a relevant fault has been established and a causal link to the AI performance seems reasonably likely, the so-called presumption of causality will address the difficulties experienced by victims in having to explain in detail how harm was caused by a specific fault or omission, which can be particularly hard when trying to understand and navigate complex AI systems. And second, victims will have more tools to seek legal reparation by introducing a right of access to evidence from companies and suppliers in case in which high-risk AI is involved. So meaning, in case of a case, the investigators get access to the information of the AI, also to understand how the AI came to its conclusion. As more countries implement such standards, bear with me, we are nearly at the end. Also, the ISO organization is working on a standard. It will be the 23894 AI risk standard. It will include the various points: inclusivity of stakeholders, dynamic risk management, best available information, human and cultural factors. Very important because depending on the culture, your interaction with an AI or a system itself may be completely different, as we discussed earlier today. And of course, continuous improvement is needed, continuous improvement of the algorithm, but also continuous learning of the people using the algorithm. And with this, coming a little bit to the conclusions, future court decisions must be observed, as judges may include the appliance of systems thinking and behavioral science into their decisions. What I mentioned regarding the Uber case, which still has to be considered more from my point of view, and also depending in which country you are, depending on the legal culture, if it's more the British, US culture, or more the Roman rights, as in big parts of Europe. It's not only important to interpret the wording of the law, but also the first decisions have a relevant impact, as all further decisions will be based on these first decisions, especially here in the US. Keep them human. Diversity, inclusion is important. The more diverse are the people inside the organizations, the better they are protected against the different biases, because based on different cultures, people are maybe more vulnerable to an authority bias, or on the other hand, more vulnerable to an individual bias. So having different people with different mindsets, cultures, working together on creating the AI and also interpreting the AI, working together with the AI, the better we are protected. I like to mention again another concept by Edward Deming, the Plan, Do, Study, Act. So we are working together with the machine, and important not just check the results of the machine, but also study, so have a little bit a deeper understanding how the results had been created, why they are changing, to understand what maybe we have to adapt with our AI decision making. Besides this, most countries come to the conclusion that with appropriate oversight, so appropriate governance, of course, risk management and compliance with ethics and law, decision making together with an AI is in benefit for society. So as was said in the beginning, people using AI will replace people not using AI, but it's not the way, or it shouldn't be the way that an AI is replacing the human. As overall conclusion, all actions caused by an AI, and this can include, of course, also the decision of no action, lead to responsibility, not by the machine, but by the people responsible for the usage of the machine, which can be the company using the machine, the doctor working together with an algorithm and coming to a decision. So if we use AI, this always leads to a responsibility, and we have to be aware of this. That's why continuous learning, we have to understand how our society is changing and how AI is used in the different steps of the decision-making process. Okay, thanks a lot for staying with me. Time for questions. You can ask me. Also, if you have any questions, maybe later, you see here my email address, and also you can find me on LinkedIn. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure and honor to discuss this topic with you.